Hi, and welcome. You're listening to the X22 Report. My name is Dave, and this is episode 878B, and today's date is January 27th, 2016, and the title of the episode is FBI Sets Up Checkpoints, Surrounds Area, and Prepares for an Armed Conflict in Oregon. Now, before I get started, I just want to make an announcement. Tomorrow, which is Thursday, I'm going to upload an interview with G. Edward Griffin and Petrea Patrick. They did a documentary film, Offline, where the power grid goes down, and the U.S. government is not prepared to help the people in this situation. So if you are on the X22Report.com email alert system, you'll get an email. If you've subscribed to the X22 Report Spotlight YouTube channel, YouTube should send you an email. If not, just come right over to the YouTube channel and you'll see the video there. Or you can come over to the X22Report.com site, scroll down a little bit, you'll see on the right-hand side, or go to News Sentinel, that's NEWZSENTINEL.com. Scroll down a little bit, look over to your right-hand side, you'll see the video there. Let's get into the economic collapse, political and geopolitical news. Today is a very sad day up in Oregon. We see that one of the militia, a rancher, was shot dead, Robert LaVoy Finicum. And we see that the others, 6 others, they were arrested. And what's happening here is the FBI, the federal government. It seems that the FBI, the federal government, devised a way to set them up. The leaders, they were on their way to participate in an evening community meeting set up by local residents. And there was a crowd of several hundred that gathered at the John Day Senior Center, and they were supposed to go there and talk to the people. And what happened was the FBI stopped them, and they blocked off about a 40-mile stretch between Burns and John Day, where basically the FBI told them to get out and they were going to make an arrest. And the FBI, they are claiming that someone pulled a gun and the agents fired at them and they hit Robert LaVoy. And what we're seeing right now, and this is coming from many different people in the area, saying that they had their hands up. They didn't pull weapons out. And if you really listen to them on all the different channels, and if you really listen to what they were saying, they were doing everything peacefully. They were on their way to have a talk, which was scheduled. And I think this was a complete setup to get them out in the open in an area where they could have this confrontation. And Tara Tenney put out there, "I want the world to know how my father was murdered today. His hands were in the air, and he was shot in the face by the American authorities. Ammon Bundy reported there are 6 witnesses to this evil." And we see right now that most likely, because when you hear them speak, they didn't want a confrontation. They weren't going to fire on the authorities unless they were firing at them. And what would be the purpose of pulling out a weapon at that point if they haven't done it at this time? So we know that the FBI is not always truthful. We know that a lot of police use this where they say, oh yes, they drew a weapon, and then we see in the video they never did draw a weapon on them. They actually shot them first. And we can see that the daughter went on and said that my dad did stress that they wouldn't pull a gun on them unless they pulled a gun, and they were all committed to not firing on federal agents. Now, why did the FBI have to pull their guns on these people? They've been talking to them. This wasn't something out of the blue. And we see right now the FBI is setting up checkpoints. They have the whole area surrounded. And they want the rest of the followers, because if you really think about it, they took the leaders away. One of the leaders was killed. And they're saying, okay, the rest of you have nothing to fight for. Your leaders are gone. Just give up. And they were hoping that everyone would just disperse and that would be it. But the people are saying, well, no, this is not over. And the FBI right now, it looks like they're getting ready to go in and get these people with force, because the government only knows one way, and that is force. And remember, this is how the revolution started when this country was born. The British government came in with force and forced the founding fathers into fighting. They were trying to do this peacefully. They're doing the same thing. They're trying to do this peacefully right now. But the government is using pressure. And we're going to have to watch this situation very, very carefully. Now, in the last couple of years, since Hurricane Katrina, we've noticed things have changed in the United States. And it seems like the government is using psychology of lockdown to make martial law the norm. I mean, first, we had Hurricane Katrina in 2005, where the National Guard, FEMA, all operating under the federal orders, bullied ordinary civilians and forced them out of their homes and into FEMA camps, to public arenas. And no one had really saw this before. Then 8 years later, in April of 2013, we had the Boston bombing. And we know this was a complete false flag. But they used it to convince everyone that you need to shelter in home and it's a lockdown. So the police were able to go from home to home and force their way into the homes of the people without a warrant, looking for criminals or terrorists. Fast forward to November of 2015, where we saw the Islamic State. I mean, we saw one in Canada, we saw it in Australia, we saw it in Paris. And again, they did the same thing, lockdown. Everyone shelter in place, lockdown, terrorists. We can go and access your homes. We can search you. So lockdown is being rolled out to the general public as the new norm. But is anyone asking, what is lockdown? Why is it necessary? Well, the entire concept of lockdown is a lie. It's an illusion. It's another psychological operation put on the public. Lockdown is based on the delusion that we are all living in one big stadium or locker room that needs to be purged one locker at a time for there to be true justice or for the government to keep you safe. Well, if you believe the government can keep you safe, that's another illusion. The lockdown psyop makes everyone think that if police can barge into anyone's home at any time, they will have the tools they need to catch the bad guys. Well, guess what? They've been catching bad guys for a very long time. And guess what? The lockdown doesn't work. Think about the Boston bombing. Did the lockdown actually work? Did the police barge into a home and find the person they were looking for? No. Someone just so happened to walk outside with their cigarette and heard noise. If they didn't do that, they would have never found this person. The lockdown psyop is based on the idea that lockdown actually works, when in fact there is no historical example where a lockdown was the direct tool that allowed police to catch a criminal. And there's many other ways of catching criminals today. But if you notice, they're linking certain words and phrases to be associated with lockdown: active shooter, gunman, extremists, manhunt, ISIS, all to lockdown. Look what happened with the U.S. Navy Medical Center in San Diego. Someone heard gunshots, there was no evidence whatsoever, and all of a sudden, lockdown. Stay in place, shelter in place. And there was no evidence whatsoever. And of course, they were out there and they were advising everyone to run, hide, or fight. Do you really need the government to tell you any of these things? No. They're conditioning everyone at this time to believe we need the government, to believe that we don't need our rights. And they are continually conditioning everyone for this, because eventually this is going to lead up to martial law, and they're going to make everyone think that this is normal. Well, it is not normal. And we have to be prepared and ready to call them out on this. Now, I'm sure many of you heard this already, that there's this new virus, Zika, which is spreading all over the world. And they're saying that the Zika virus is believed to cause brain damage in infants. It's spreading worldwide after the outbreak in Brazil. The World Health Organization said it is likely to spread across Americas. And the first cases have already been detected in Europe. Putin is out there telling everyone that he's going to be developing a vaccine. The President of the United States is out there saying that, yes, we're going to be developing a vaccine. And I wouldn't be surprised if the CDC comes out with all their statistical numbers to let us know how many people are going to be infected by a certain date, because they did this with Ebola. They did this with the swine flu. They did this with pretty much everything, and none of it ever came true. What this seems to be is that they're pushing the agenda for more vaccines. I mean, Brazil right now is sending about 200,000 troops with leaflets to go door to door to let everyone know to be careful about mosquitoes, to buy mosquito repellent, and to stay away from those areas that have mosquitoes. But when we look deeper into this, we have to start to look of where did this actually come from. And there was a program that was funded by a $19.7 million grant from Bill and Melinda Gates, their foundation. And the recent outbreak of Zika virus in Brazil could be linked to the release into the wild of genetically modified mosquitoes in recent field trials in Brazil. The Zika virus, which is detected in 18 of the 26 states in Brazil, is transmitted by a mosquito. And it seems like this might have been released from what the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation was working on. And of course we know that Bill and Melinda, they want to control the population, that they're behind a lot of this. They're using their money for this. And we see that genetically modified anything is really not good for the environment. You're playing with the code of life, and you don't know what the repercussions are going to be down the line. But just like that Ebola outbreak, we're starting to see the same exact thing occur right now, where the pharmaceutical companies want to create vaccines and vaccinate every single person. And it seems like this is where it might have originated, because this is a very odd coincidence that they were working on this at the same exact time. Now, out in Malaysia, the Prime Minister's bank account had about $681 million in mystery money deposited in the account. And they're saying that this came from Saudi Arabia, which most likely was transferred from the United States. And if we remember, we had elections there, we had planes go down in Malaysia, and I'm wondering if this was some type of payoff. Of course, they're brushing it off, saying, oh no, this money was returned, he never really had the money. But it seems like there were a lot of connections that are leading everyone to believe that this was a payoff for certain things that occurred. Now, John Kerry is out in Beijing, and he stated that nuclear-armed North Korea poses an overt threat, a declared threat to the world. And he is pushing for a strong United Nations response to the North's latest atomic blast. Now, he's saying that the United States needs to protect its people from the evil North Korea. And we're seeing that John Kerry is trying to convince everyone that North Korea detonated a miniaturized hydrogen bomb. Now, again, a lot of the experts, many of the other countries are saying there is no evidence for this whatsoever. And it looks like at this point they're using this for all propaganda purposes. So because of all this, the U.S. decided that they're going to deploy the Gray Eagle unmanned aerial vehicle that are superior in combat to the drones in Iraq and Afghanistan. And it is scheduled to enter South Korea in July. It will be equipped with night vision cameras. They can make flights lasting up to 30 hours and are designed to monitor the areas along the demilitarized zone separating South and North Korea. Can anyone say provoking North Korea? So the new drones that the U.S. and South Korean armed forces will be able to strike helicopters, tanks at a distance of about 4 to 9 miles. And each one of these are equipped with 4 anti-tank missiles, Hellfire 4 glide bombs, and also can be equipped with air-to-air missiles. It looks like they're provoking North Korea. This is exactly what it is about. The whole hydrogen bomb scenario was complete propaganda. The U.S. right now is going to keep troops in Afghanistan for decades to come. What? We were lied to once again? Obama said they were all coming home. Well, guess what? They're not. Washington's plan to pull the majority of soldiers out by early 2017 has been canceled. What we've learned is that we can't leave there, and this is coming from a Pentagon official. They are never, ever leaving Afghanistan. The only reason that came up, and Obama made the announcement, because at the time President Karzai would not sign the bilateral security agreement which allowed the U.S. soldiers into the country. When President Karzai's term came up, there was a new election. John Kerry was there to help out. They got the president in there that they wanted, and he quickly signed the agreement. And this allowed the soldiers to stay in the country. This is why they're never leaving. They never wanted to leave in the first place. But Obama had to explain why some were coming home now. So he made this whole thing like, oh, look, I'm bringing them home. No, it was fake, phony, and false. We see the UN is blasting Saudi Arabia and Britain because they're saying that they are hitting civilians. And this is out of a new UN report. The report found that Saudi airstrikes are breaching international law by hitting civilian targets including refugee camps, civilian weddings, vehicles, medical facilities, and schools. The UN panel of experts on Yemen used satellite imagery to look at areas before and after bombings, which also targeted an Oxfam warehouse storing equipment for a water project funded by the EU. Because this is not about going in and fighting the military, the Houthis of Yemen. This is about punishing the people of Yemen for kicking out the puppet government. And those people are going to pay. And they're trying to destroy the infrastructure, make the people suffer, so they accept the puppet government once again. This is all orchestrated by the U.S. government. Now, we understand the Syrian ceasefire peace talks are supposed to occur January 29th, but there are so many conditions on these peace talks which are coming from the Syrian opposition and the U.S. government that it's getting to be ridiculous. And the Syrian opposition continually sets new conditions for peace talks. And right now, Lavrov is saying, okay, this is ridiculous. He warned that attempts by the UN to place conditions on opposition groups joining the fight against terror could hamper the war effort. We're not going to be talking about regime change. We're not going to be talking about which land you can have. We're going to be talking about how to get rid of the Islamic State, Al-Qaeda, and the other terrorist groups. But we need to remember, This is not on the agenda of the United States. The agenda of the United States is to remove Assad, is to capture Syria, to kick out the government, to build a pipeline, to have the port in Tartus, to put the oil on the dollar. That's the agenda. That's the goal. The Islamic State works for the United States. They're there to create chaos. They're there to remove Assad, period. And I know Russia is continually pushing peace, ceasefire. They want this to work. But it looks like the United States government, the opposition groups attached to the United States, they're setting this up to fail. They don't want this to move forward. They don't want peace in the region. They don't want the Islamic State removed from Syria, because what would be the reason for the United States to be in there and the coalition forces? They wouldn't have a reason. So they don't want this to move forward. Instead, they're planning an event. They're planning something huge that will cause complete chaos in the region. They're bringing in ground troops. They're getting prepared and ready to mount an offensive like we've never seen before. This is what they're planning. And we see the Islamic State, they're out there saying they have special forces trained and ready to go for a large-scale attack in the EU. I mean, we have a new movie out called London is Falling. We had Olympus is Falling. They're using this to condition us that terrorists are coming for us. That London can fall, Washington can fall, and the terrorists can take over. Because they know the economy, the private Western central bank economies, they're collapsing. And their alternative to the collapse is, let's start a war to hide the collapse and blame it on another group or country. This is where we are headed, slowly but surely. This is their agenda. This is what they're pushing. And soon we're going to see the big bang. Listen, everyone, thanks a lot for listening. Be well, be safe, and especially be prepared. Thanks a lot.